Okay, everybody, hello, welcome. Hello, everybody, welcome. Thank you. So, welcome. Thank you for coming to our crossing number 8. Also, welcome our online visitors or followers for this crossing number 8 with the tarot card Temperance under the title Public Institutions of Arts Responding to Emergency. And that's basically our second event, or directly kind of related to the ongoing war in the Ukraine after the lecture by Vasil Cherepanin, who now actually today is on his way back to Kiev. And we should say that, and thank him again for coming and discussing with us the emergencies in the Ukrainian war. And that panel is related to public institutions of arts responding to emergencies. And now I have the utmost pleasure to welcome our guests of tonight. One is joining us online, Zdenka Badovinac, who is here with us on Zoom, who unfortunately couldn't make it to Salzburg. Then we have Ekaterina Degot and Sebastian Cichocki, yeah, I got it. And Marina Fokidis. So I will briefly introduce our panelists before we then go directly into the discussion. Zdenka Badovinac is the director of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Zagreb. She's known internationally as long-time director of the Moderna Galleria, the Museum of Modern Art, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Ljubljana. And for her outstanding curatorial work and important theoretical contributions as a writer in the international discourses on the geopolitics of contemporary art in Eastern Europe and global art history. When she was awarded the Igor Zabel Award in 2020, Badovinac was recognized as one of the most important and rigorous locally rooted and globally connected professionals in the field of cultural production of the past decades. Welcome, Zdenka. Then, Ekaterina Degot is an art historian, researcher, and curator born in Moscow and based in Graz, leading steirischer Herbst as artistic director and chief curator since 2018, and just has been expanded for another 5 years, correct? Right. Prior to that, Ekaterina Degot was artistic director of the Academy of the Arts of the World in Cologne from 2014 to 2017. She received the Igor Zabel Award for Culture and Theory in November 2014. The focus of her work is on aesthetic and social political issues in Russia and Eastern Europe from the 19th century to the post-Soviet era. Before leaving Russia in 2014, she was one of the curators at State Tretyakov Gallery, art columnist for the newspaper Kommersant, and from 2008 until 2012, she was senior editor of OpenSpace.Russia. Welcome, Ekaterina. And Sebastian Cichocki is the chief curator and head of research at the Museum of Modern Art in Warsaw. He is a member of the board of programming at the Forum for the Culture of Culture at the Theater in Warsaw, the Sunflower Solidarity Community at the Center in Warsaw, an aid cultural and counter-propaganda initiative in Warsaw for those who suffered from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and one of the founding members of artist activist initiatives, the Consortium for Post-Artistic Practices, the Office for Post-Artistic Services. And he just recently has been appointed as the curator for the 40th ever International Irlands Biennale of Contemporary Art in Limerick. Welcome, Sebastian. And finally, I think I don't need, in this kind of small auditorium here, to introduce Marina Fokidis, a long-term collaborator of the Academy and the curator of this year's public program, The Fortress of Crossed Destinies. Welcome, Marina, and I now hand over the microphone to you as the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie, and thank you for once more for the great collaboration, for hosting us here. Thank to our speakers for being with us. And yeah.
Sorry, I've got one thing. to say is if you would kindly wear a mask. We just were informed that we had one positive corona case at the Academy today, so it would be great if you, I know it's quite rather warm inside here and we will open some windows later, but if you have, please do wear a mask. Thank you.
So once more, welcome. Thank you for Zdenka, Ekaterina, and Sebastian for accepting our invitation. It's a big honor to be with such a panel. And if you allow me, I give a small context to the program for the people that have been here before, as it is a continuum, and for the newcomers as well. So, as Sophie said, this is the 8th already crossing in the program, which is called the Fortress of Cross Destinies, which runs through 3 periods of the summer program of crosses, and it's open to students and the general public in Salzburg, but also internationally as we are live streaming the events. The war, or the wars, and other urgent and historical conflicts and processes of imperialism has been addressed in this room more than once in the past weeks. Vassiv Cherepanin, as Sophie said, came to speak to us from Kiev and returning today addressed directly the war in Ukraine and its entanglements, followed by a series of talks such as this by artist Leolia Stragi and Tracy Rong, among others, who refer to the rotten and disastrous conditions of hegemonies through describing their own work. Also, in the following weeks, we're going to hear Flaka Haliti, who will be speaking about the formation of this place where we are being hosted, the Discourse Bar, where we are sitting right now. And she will shed light also on her experience, of her own first-hand experience with the bombing in Kosovo, and her criticism reflected in some ways in this kind of deformation of camouflage pattern in the ceiling. Also later, we're going to have curator and writer Bonaventure Sobenjendinguk, who will challenge the notion of solidarity and its somehow, quote, color, end of quote. And this program is conceived, as I told you, as a continuum, so I urge you to visit the Summer Academy site and go through all the crossings that they took place up to now and they will be taking place as a whole. Many of you have heard before in this room, but this is also the title of this program, The Fortress of Cross Destinies, comes by an Italo Calvino book that it's called The Castle of Cross Destinies. And the castle in the original title has been somehow changed to fortress, not only because most of these students, let's say again in quotes, are working in a historical Hohensalzburg fortress, but also because we wish to somehow instigate a paradoxical play with the word fortress and its nuances. So in a way, this title is a symbolic hijack of the traditional meaning of a fortress. It's an effort to somehow transform its duty from guarding monocultural hegemonies towards maybe guarding the crucial possibility of cross-fertilization and coexistence, if this is ever possible. So like the opening of the Calvino novel, revealing that all the protagonists in the book had been struck dumb, we found ourselves muted sometimes by the continuous hazards, such as the everlasting processes of colonialism, economic crisis, environmental disasters, pandemics, the persistent violence in all levels, private and public, and of course the successive deadly wars that they're non-stop. Can we arrive in the formation of new old vocabularies that encompass risk, but also promise new forms of solidarity and interconnectedness beyond normative narratives? Who knows? That's not sure. These are times to occupy together either fictive castles, as in the book, or real experimental academies, as here, and to reflect on this kind of cross-destinies, whatever this is, and on new possibilities of transforming them. So to focus in the panel, as we speak, as we say, the Russian brutal invasion of Ukraine continues, and it's now in its 5th or 6th month, I don't know, as we speak. And so public cultural institutions all around Europe, maybe not many, are taking the necessary steps to confront the current atrocities, both through bare actions, but also through the formation of languages in an effort to address this the unspoken matter. Either by adapting their content in the program to raise awareness, or by broadening their mission to encompass ways of actual solidarity towards the victims, museum, festival, art organizations, among other public agencies, demonstrating their active engagement with the societies that they are serving, public museums, I mean. So Zdenka, Ekaterina, and Sebastian will discuss their distinct approaches to these matters through the agency of art. And somehow we can discuss on how can institutions serve the public in cases of emergencies such this or such wars without instrumentalizing, taking advantage the pain of others in their own benefit. Because that's the case from the cases you're gonna hear of not taking the advantage, most probably, of catastrophic disasters. We will start with Zdenka, that unfortunately is not here with us, but fortunately is on the screen here with us. And hello, Zdenka, and thank you so much.
Hello. Oh, sorry, I'm not there. But it's nice to see you, at least this way.
So we will have 3 15-minute presentations, and then we'll start the Q&A, which will be open to all of you too. Zdenka, we hear you.
Okay, thank you very much, Marina. It's a really great pleasure to have a chance to contribute to this very important discussion. So I will be talking from my own experience, especially with the war in the 90s. I will not relate directly to the actual war in Europe, but yes, indirectly very much. And I hope also we can try to find some, I don't know, it is not about comparing the both situations, but it's more about asking, you know, the question that is getting, we are repeating it constantly when there is war, but the war somewhere near, you know, we don't react to the wars normally that are far away. And we have to be aware that the wars are, there is always a war somewhere in this world, but we are discussing the war when there is. So we constantly ask ourselves what to be done, you know, how can we react to the war? And we are, you know, always we have this feeling of helplessness as we cannot really do much. But those who are actually direct victims of the war always say we could do something more than we do. So this is always this kind of, you know, dilemma, what and how. And in the mid-90s, we reacted to the war, especially we worked in Moderna Galleria. I see my former institution is still there instead of my name. I don't know how it, that doesn't matter. So I will also share some images. So please, if you can enable me to share. Okay. Oops. Okay, can you see it? Hello? Are we in contact?
Yes, we are in contact.
Okay, because sometimes, so you see the image.
Not the image.
No? You see only me?
Yeah. Can we help her or no? No. No.
Okay, I'll try again to share.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Now it's on. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the mid-90s, we in Moderna Galleria with my colleague Igor Zabel, who was mentioned 2 times already today. Unfortunately, he died in 2005. So there is only the award that with Katja we got it. So in 95 February, we went to Sarajevo when there was still a war with Group Irvin. And we went there with this question. We wanted to discuss with the people there how can we help, what it can be done. And we went there with UNPROFOR plane, and we met some people there from the culture and discussing the possibilities, and we found together the answer. So the answer was that something has to be done what will have a real effect on the future of the city. So we wanted to go beyond the humanitarian gesture as we normally face when something like that is happening. But at the same time, we wanted to go to avoid all the different traps of war profiteering. I think, Marina, you mentioned something like this, how it's difficult actually, how many traps are in this way to be of help. So I will make this story very short because we don't have time. So we collected 13 artworks from very known international artists with a big value on the art market, blue chip names. We asked them for the real works, not only small sketches or drawings or something, but real value. Because, as you will see later, the question what to do was very much related to the art system, and art market is part of it. And when we are discussing this question, we are trapped actually in the system. And so we found this answer that it works in the art system. So we discussed this a lot, and we found out that Bosnia was not part of the art system, the Bosnian artists. That's why also their problem was not very visible. So we collected the works of Marjetica Potrč, of Anish Kapoor, of Irvin, artists Do You Know Your Duty, Richard Deacon, Miroslav Balka, Marina Abramovic, Ginter Brus, Thomas Schutt, Bill Viola, Sophie Kahl. And what is very interesting also, we got the whole Russian pavilion from Venice Biennale from 95. So all those works are now in Sarajevo, and they are waiting for their building. It's one of the collections. There were different initiatives, and many international artworks were collected. And the idea was to open the museum in 2000. Renzo Piano was involved in the reconstruction of the existing historical museum, but the reconstruction never really happened, and the situation there is very sad. So the works are in depot. So we took this question really very seriously, what to be done. and also make it more precise. Actually, we asked ourselves why art and the art system did not respond to the war in Bosnia. And as we wanted to answer it more complex way, we organized a symposium, Living with Genocide. Actually, Marina Abramovic proposed to create this symposium in 1996 with different participants from international art world, from the art system. And we discussed them, of course, the dilemmas that we had. So dilemmas related to these questions. And as the questions were so difficult to answer, only from our perspective, from the curators, artists' perspective, we invited Tomáš Masnak, very important Slovene political theorist, to organize a second part with the political theorists. He invited some political theorists to discuss this subject. So our initial finding actually was that the great majority of intellectuals and artists did not take a stand against the genocide in Bosnia, the genocide of the Bosnian Muslims. We asked ourselves what is in the structure of contemporary political theory and art which has either permitted or dictated the lack of recognition of understanding of clear evil that was there in Bosnia at that time. So many thoughts were circulating and referring to the it was in the mid-90s, and this postmodern theory was still very much around, the theory of simulacrum and so on. So, the war actually somehow proved that theory was kind of wrong, but at the same time, it was still there. And there were also people, as for example, Jean Baudrillard, who were very critical towards some intellectuals, artists who went to Bosnia, to Sarajevo, to besiege Sarajevo, to help. So, for example, Baudrillard chose Susan Sontag, who had made several visits to besiege Sarajevo, as a paradigmatic example of the Western intellectual. In Baudrillard's word, what Susan Sontag was looking for in Sarajevo was reality, that which she and the West miss the most. In Baudrillard's words, and I quote his words here, "It is necessary to remake reality where there is blood." He goes on, "Everywhere the new intellectual order follows the path opened by the new world order. Everywhere misfortune, misery, and suffering have become a raw material and original scene." So he's going on. I don't have time here to read the whole quotation of what he was saying, but it's clear, he was, I think, very academically approaching the whole thing. We were there, February 95, still the war, and we met people, artists, young people, writers, old people, very different members of the city population, and they were there closed, for 3 years. And believe me, not really many people were coming there. We know, about some like Susan Sontag and some theater people, so some things were happening. but it was impossible, for Sarajevo people to live without a special permit for 3 years. So we, for example, met people, young students from the academy, and we brought them the catalogs and some magazines. And for them, it was the first information after 3 years about the current art in Europe and international events. We also spoke with those people about Susan Sontag. And we also asked them what they were thinking about Baudrillard's criticism. And they all said that Susan Sontag was extremely important for them, that everybody who came extremely helped them, that, the humanitarian aid, food and medicine was of course important, but what they were missing the most was the intellectual, spiritual food, let's put it this way. And I think also how Susan Sontag understood it is very important. And I would like to read a very short quote from the magazine The Nation, what she said at that time. What has followed in the wake of 1989 and the suicide of the Soviet Empire is the final victory of capitalism and of ideology of consumerism, which entails the discrediting of political as such. And that makes sense. And that makes sense is what makes sense is a private life, individualism, and the cultivation of the self and private well-being, featuring above all the ideal of health are the values to which intellectuals are most likely to subscribe. So why did artists and art establishment, the international art establishment, not react to the war in Bosnia? Where in similar situation in history of the 20th century, such as the October Revolution, the Spanish Civil War, the Vietnam War, they were able to respond immediately and with a great effect. So what actually was so different in the 90s than in those decades before in the 20th century? While Western world helped Bosnia primarily through humanitarian aid and by taking in refugees. So the political theorist Tomáš Mastnak identified the destructive nature of this humanitarianism. I would like to quote him. By addressing Bosnians as simply humans and not as citizens of a state that fall victim to military aggression, humanitarianism has been denying their civic existence. In the world today, it is only as citizens that people can hope to have a say in what happens in their lives. A question central to the inability of political theory and art to comprehend the war against Bosnia is, in our view, the question of the state. So we, with the help of the political theorists at that symposium, as Tomáš Mastnak, so we recognized actually that one of the central problem of the war in Bosnia was actually the question of the state, because the state in Bosnia was treated as the Muslim state. So there were some questions around that. For example, has the state not been seen as a problem because when it comes to the Bosnian state, or because of the prominence of anti-statism in Western political tradition. You know, we all also in the art world and theory, we are more or less, striving for the less, not for the most state. So what is the problem here? Here, an analogy suggests itself with the behavior of the intellectuals and artists who today clearly no longer believe in their own political commitment and therefore no longer believe in their role as citizens. And how important is the role of the citizens? We see also today with the refugees, the refugees who are coming to Europe without the paper. So if you don't have the citizenship, you are actually nobody. Also, Agamben wrote a lot about it. So the question of the citizen and of the state is important here. So it doesn't matter how we answer it. It is there to be discussed today, as it was at that time in the mid 90s. So with who we are, who have to react. So are we the citizens or we are individuals? We are the artists or curators. So individuals of the established art system. So just people who are beyond this kind of definitions. For example, the artist beyond the art system. As Peter Weibel, he was one of the participants in that symposium, and he presented art as a part of the system which also created the war. So it is the same, the art and the art system and the war. It's the same thing. I mean, it's that co-creates the conditions that lead to the war. A part of the system of culture, as Weibel said, whose constructive concepts are, according to Freud, in civilization and its discontent, identification, emotionalization, and sublimation. The only art which opposes war is, in Weibel's opinion, art which is outside the existing system, which is therefore anti-art. And I will come back a little bit with one example later to this anti-art beyond the system. So, as I said before, one of the most interesting donations to this future museum in Sarajevo was the Russian pavilion with a group of Russian artists curated by Victor Misiano in 1995. So in the last, it was consisted of 2 rooms, and in the last room of the pavilion, we wanted the artist and the curator to collect money for the victims of the war in Chechnya at that time. But they somehow didn't succeed. So they changed their purpose and they decided to collect money for artificial reason. And Victor Misiano was one of the participants at the symposium. And I think that his contribution was extremely interesting and important when we think about today's situation in Russia and in Ukraine. So he asked the same question, as we asked for Bosnia. So he asked why we were not able to collect money for the victims of the Chechen war. So why this indifference of the part of the art community in Moscow to disaster in their own country? Why do critical artists not exist in Moscow? So these were Misiano's questions, and he had some answers to that question. I'm very curious how Katja will comment it. So he said that one of the reasons that the Moscow artists or Russian artists, whatever, were not really reacting to the Chechen war was that there were actually no right discourse, not the right theory that would explain what was going on. And he mentioned two discourses that dominated Moscow's scene at that time in the mid-90s. So one was the discourse of the former dissident, and another one that was so-called postmodernistic, he call it like ironic discourse. Both of them, they emerged already in Soviet times, especially this postmodernist discourse, opposed both the ideologization of the official ideology and the ideologization of the anti-ideology. It means this kind of dissident theorists. This
I just interfere 1 minute because we're having the time problem. So I'm just asking, because if it's a good point to pass it now to Ekaterina, or you want to wrap it up and then we pass to Katerina if there is something.
I think it's better if I go on and then.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But
okay.
we have to wrap it up because it's 15. We have this kind of.
Okay.
Sorry for interruption. Yeah.
Okay. So I will try to. And so the second reason was actually the question of identity of the Russian artist. So at that time already, he said that actually there was no art system and no artist, that only the Russian artists existed. And the criticism of the Russian artists towards the system was mostly about their own role, how the West saw them as the Russian artists, how they represent the Russia. So there was no actually place to think about the Chechen war in this mental frame. And then the third reason was the question of the communication. So the infrastructure collapsed, and as the infrastructure collapsed, the means of communication collapsed, and the public actually also ceased to exist. So what replaced the public was the crowd, and he mentioned also Alexander Brenner as this anti-artist, the artist beyond the system, who reacted to the people as to the crowd on very aggressive way. You probably know him. We can talk later about him maybe. But so his action was actually very provocative. So how can we explain it is also that he tried to influence that this crowd become a public, or even better, a civil society. And what I think is very important today when we think about this symposium and our actions 20 years later, and I also wanted to refer to the situation in Eastern Europe. In last 2 years, we had anti-authoritarian government protests here, and our protesters actually succeeded to create a strong civil society, and also proposed to the government, we have a new government now, some ideas that were also in a way seriously discussed. So and now I want to conclude. So what we can learn is actually that in the 90s, the situation, the condition we live at the moment started developing. And this situation we can define as, the situation where also Eastern Europe became the part of this liberal democracy world. And today I mentioned this anti-authoritarian demonstrations and situation in Eastern Europe that we consider as illiberal. And here I think it's important to quote Tomasz Masnak again, but from the this year conference that we had in Ljubljana, where also some people from Ukraine were participating on the Zoom. So the question of the conference was, what is democracy, how the Eastern Europe is related to it, if at all. So the quote is here, and I read it. Liberal Democrats and illiberals, at least those in power, share the same basic neoliberal policies and economic political outlook. The untouchable freedom of big private economic power, strong repressive state in its service, and political disposition of the underlying population. So I think this is the condition that we live in Russia, in Ukraine, in Slovenia, in Eastern Europe, and all around the world. And so we want to have some hope, of course, at the end. And I think this condition, the global condition of liberal democracy, is something that relates to the power of 1%. And the good news is that those who are not in this percent are the majority. And this majority hopefully can do something in the future if the people that belong to majority consider themselves beyond the border of illiberal or liberal division. So we live in the same world of this liberal democracy, and we have to think the democracy beyond the liberal democracy model. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Zdenka, and good to leave it in a wish before we go to Ekaterina Degot. Many things we have even informally discussed. Yeah, we are trying to stay in 15 minutes, but Zdenka was not next to us to touch her jacket and say stop, but it was very interesting and great to have you. So, Ekaterina. It doesn't work, or it works?
I have no idea.
We don't know.
Okay, so
the microphone.
okay, I'm very glad to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's always glad to be here. It's a great institution. Great to see the students. It will be great to hear your questions and to learn what is on your mind, the audience in general, and the students in particular. Zdenka asked very interesting question about Moscow, which I have some comments to that, but that will take too much time. We can return to it because I have an opinion. I'm, of course, also as someone who's kind of connected to this context, I'm constantly thinking why indeed the Chechenian war was not taken seriously enough by the society, by artists, and myself included. What was the reason to it? But today I wanted to say something about how in this year edition of Steirischer Herbst we are reacting to the Russian aggression in Ukraine. Just a couple of words what Steirischer Herbst is, if someone does not know. It's a festival which exists, it's a yearly festival which exists since '68. And the festival does not have its own exhibition spaces or theater stage. So it has to work with very different places, venues, very often in public space, or to find solutions of different kind. And for 2 years before this one, we already had, as you might imagine, an emergency edition. Because everything, so we're doing a lot of performance and theater production and related to audience being close to artists and performers. And for the last 2 years, it was problematic. So we had first an edition of Paranoia TV when it was almost impossible to do. It was most of the things were online, and it was a fake TV. Then last year edition was called The Way Out, and it mostly happened outdoor, but that was also conceptualized as a new ways for art. But this year, actually, there was something that was planned 5 years ago already. So for the first and only time, we are getting a big exhibition space in a museum. So it took 5 years to realize this. So a big exhibition was planned. And this exhibition, I thought about it already before, and already last year and even 2 years ago, I started to research the collection. And already last year, I decided that I was surprised. I was mostly interested in less known works in the collection. 19th century is my big interest. I discovered there are many, many paintings that are somehow related to the war. There is no war depicted, but there is always some recruiter coming, recruiter going, an officer that comes on vacation. And you always have a feeling that there is war somewhere nearby. But we are not talking about it, we are not really acknowledging it. Just some people who are soldiers, officers, they are connected to it. And I wanted to do an exhibition about that. And I already had the title, not just that, but as a metaphor, general metaphor about Austria. Austria interests me a lot, I must say. The topic was, I was hesitating, so my feeling was like, it has to be something like what Zdenka said, actually. There is always a war somewhere, precisely my feeling. And then I talked to my native friends, native speakers of German, who said, oh, that has to be called Ein Krieg in der Ferne. A war somewhere far away, because it's about a war being suppressed, denied, pushed away, and that works in German like that. And this is why already from German we came to English title, A War in the Distance. And then a war came not in the distance, but very nearby. So the title and the concept of the show was already ready last year, but when the war and the aggression came this year, so we understood that we have to make an extra edition, an emergency edition. So this is why we did a prologue show. So this is the building of Neue Galerie in Graz, where the prologue show happened already this summer, and where the exhibition in the autumn will be. So the prologue show is the show of films on Ukraine by mostly Ukrainian filmmakers. And I'm very grateful to Ukrainian artists who gave us their films and produced some of the new works for this show and the show in the autumn. Some of them are my close friends, have been for a long time. Some of them are my new friends now, and I'm very grateful to them that they agreed to work with us. And to curators of this show, which are my colleagues David Riff and Mirela Bacek. So that was a video show, just very quickly what was there. So it all started with one of the greatest Soviet filmmakers, Alexander Dovzhenko, who was actually kind of not so well known as Eisenstein or Zigovertov because he was Ukrainian and at some point considered Ukrainian nationalist. At the same time, he was and still is criticized in the Ukraine as being not Ukrainian nationalist enough, as being, contaminated by Soviet ideology and Soviet narratives. So this is one of his greatest films, Arsenal, which gives the context of the wars on this, tragic territory. Tragic Ukraine has a very violent and tragic history in 20th century already, which is being now violently reversed with the Russian aggression. So it all started with that very strong point. So this is a gas attack. So already in Dovzhenko films, there is rape, there is sexual assault, there is fear of gas attack, there are meaningless battles, and lots of violence. Then it goes with the film of Dana Kavelina, contemporary filmmaker, who is touching upon the very difficult topic of the rape and guilt from the feminist perspective in a very surrealist film of hers. Mykola Ridney, a great artist, and we were very glad also to get him out of the war situation, at least for a moment, for an artist talk. You know that this is, for that you need a special letter. So a male artist could leave the country for a short time. So this is his very brave film, which and very controversial, that addresses this controversial topic of the far right, not just which now triumphs in Russia, but was also part of Ukrainian social landscape. And he's going to the roots of it, which are Italian right wing and their connection to the futurists. So this connection, this very toxic connection of art to right-wing politics, it's a topic of his essay film. And Pavel Braila, an artist from Moldova, a place who also came to us. Moldova is a transit hub for refugees, and he was, at the very beginning of the war, he was volunteering at the refugee camp and met a woman whose name is Vera. And she's a pensionist from Preluki, and she's a very optimistic person. It's a documentary about her, her life and how her relation to people. She writes poetry, she's a poet herself. And at the very end of the film, she's talking over the phone with her daughter, and her daughter says, "So now, are you happy? You were talking all the time that your Putin will save us." So now we are discovering that she was actually a Putinist. So what I like here, and of course now converted, so the complexity of this story. So what will come in the autumn, which I'll show very briefly, will open with we will open the traditional entrance to the museum. If you have been to Graz, you know that it's actually closed for many, many years. Now we are reopening it from that side, and there will be a sculpture by Zhanna Kadyrova, which is being created now out of metal that is being collected in Ukraine with a real holes of bullets, but it will be painted and kind of varnished, lackiert, ja, sozusagen, so it will represent a safe war for the Western audience, so to speak. This is being built. So at the very beginning of the narrative is this Nazi painting, which it is striking that it's actually called steirischer herbst. So it's the autumn of 39. What happened in the autumn of 39? The war. So, but the artist was painting it in the summer, but this is again another image of the war and the festival, how we can imagine it in a Nazi way. Also, the first festival happened in '68 on the background of refugees coming from Czechoslovakia to Graz. That will be also exhibited. So we are in the exhibition. What is important that we are totally breaking all the hierarchies of, let's say, documents and paintings. There are no masterpieces there. It's not just, it's historical works and contemporary artists, and I'm mostly showing historical because contemporary works are mostly new commissions. And there are clusters about different topics, very subjective, curatorial narrative, and the stories are happening in between. But I'm just showing you some examples. It's a film by Yannick Franzen, an artist from Vienna, who deals with another dark background of the Glyptothek in Wien in relation to prisoners of war. We're exhibiting also, these are anthropological and actually racist studies of prisoners of World War I and II that are also in the collection of Neue Galerie. We did lots of research. I personally did, so most of the things we are exhibiting from the historical collections were actually never exhibited before, or very rarely. So this is how the war in the distance looked for me initially. So those recruited, all those things that were in 1916, people were forced to bring them, to melt them for the front. And contemporary work that will be related to him, it's a photographer who did photos about the war in Yugoslavia. And after that, he's obsessed to see war everywhere. This is not war. This is just like economical, buildings destroyed because of economy. But he sees the war everywhere. And the new film by Josef Dabernik also will be with us. Also not about the war, but looks like you see Georg Schellhammer, who plays here. Some of the historical artists I'd like to highlight whom we discovered is Krzysztof Glass, completely unknown, emigrated from Poland in '68 because he was an anti-communist, but also he was against the anti-Jewish campaign in Poland, and he lived in Vienna since. He was a very interesting political artist who was also, most of the things, as you see, we are showing is some sort of a figurative art, political realism, something through the cracks, actually very rarely shown also in this, modernism. Steirischer herbst is very much connected to this mythos modernismus, so the myth of modern art, which is completely autonomous, unrelated to anything political, and also unrelated to any reality. And this is how you can confront Nazis with that sort of art. This is something very different that was actually repressed. So we're showing this. But there are also artists who are real fascists there in their collections. So there was such a thing. It was called Malia Wochen. Artists were coming to Graz from Eastern Europe. And this guy, Drago, in '68, he exhibited such a painting where we could call it postmodern, right? So because there is Stalin, there is swastika, there is all sort of things there. But later he developed actually, as we discovered, a strong TV career and of a right-wing personality. And maybe some of the last things I show will not go very quickly to the end to show you Flaka's work. Some of what also was interesting for me, that some of the works, there is this tradition in Graz to give paintings to political offices. Something they ask, or maybe museum suggests. So this painting of Georg Eisler, which is about the troubles, the political and ethnic conflicts in Ireland, North Ireland, that is actually given to Graz police headquarters. It is still there. And they are using it actually to teach young policemen how to work at the demonstration. So I commissioned photos of many political officers in Graz for which political party, actually what they're actually showing. This is very interesting. So this will be as a curatorial intervention. So I'll skip this. This is another, discovery, which is a Yugoslavian, Croatian, actually, artist, Zvezana Fio, who represents strikingly, to me, represents herself as an Aboriginal woman. What would that mean? Like 10 years prior to the war. We talked to her, we found her, she's in Vienna. And she explicitly said that for her it was related to the feeling of the imminent war. And we are addressing, of course, the colonial topic with works by contemporary artists, Willem de Rooij in this case, and Flaka Halitsi, whom you know very well, and at her exhibition we're sitting here. This will be a new work, Whose Bones. It will be a sculpture where we cannot tell, is it a tiger or panthera, or is it a cat? So like two different animals who have like different classes. Like one is high class, aristocratic animal, and cat is one of the low class. But that is like, she will tell you more about her own work. And the Ukrainian artist Ekaterina Lisavenko, who was one of the students here, will be also doing a new series of big drawings and paintings, also related to this topic of dehumanization through the war and in the situation of the war. I find her one of the strongest artists in contemporary Ukraine. I'm very glad I met her. She's on residency with us right now. So that's what I can show you about the upcoming exhibition. And now I'm giving the place to Sebastian.
Thank you very much, Ekaterina. That's exciting. The coming exhibition actually is when?
It's opening, Werbung, Pause, 22nd of September. The festival is open. There are also other things. There are also performances and an exhibition of Faroki and many things. It's just part of it. But 22nd of September, please come by to see us.
So we will come back because now there are already questions are being coming up about the human, the dehumanizing, the citizen, the individual that but we have lots to discuss, and it was amazing to see this collection existing there and bringing it up to the light of contemporary viewer, because very often we see this kind of gray zone of contemporary viewers forgetting this kind of relations. But with no further ado, thank you so much, Sebastian, for waiting. And
thank you.
And thank you.
Now?
Yeah.
Because you must be suffocating. Yeah. Can we open the windows, maybe? Yeah.
It's hotter better here. It's hotter here than.
It's too loud.
And here is hotter,
okay,
where
so,
we sit.
I promise to be compact. Yeah, I will try to squeeze it because we are supposed to.
Never mind.
Never mind. Yeah. So okay. Yeah, it's a fantastic setup to be in, like, but it has the column. Yeah. So the guys like behind. Yeah. So I can. Yeah. So. I'm Sebastian Cichocki from the Museum of Modern Art in Warsaw. I will try to be fast, but the topic might be kind of stretched to a kind of symposium or a seminar, because being asked by Marina and knowing the context and thinking about our like current situation, I was thinking about the history of about the museology. The history of art museums in those kind of transitional critical moments, which might be quite an interesting topic to explore. So as it is an academy, I would like to present a few historical examples and to kind of close it, wrap it, with a current operation, activity, thing which is going on in the museum in Warsaw, trying to actually articulate and stress up like a very simple thought, a very simple kind of observation about on museums, on like art institutions. You know, we all know that art might be something else. Art might be artwork, might be a part of the other system. It might be a part of economy. It might be part of like a political struggle. It might be part of agriculture. We know about it, but we don't often remember about institutions. And I really trust, like I really believe in institutions, like art institutions. Not all of them, you know, but there are some good comrades who. Sometimes become something else, something completely else. And I find it like super interesting, like when the shell, when the structure, when the infrastructure is serving something else, something which you cannot define, which you cannot articulate, which you cannot label. And I think that there are the most exciting and the most interesting moments in this evolution of this very weird creature, of the monster, which is called an art museum. And I wanted to show you a little biological sample at the beginning, and to kind of trying to find like a metaphor, try to kind of glue it together, which is an endospore. An endospore, it's a term, it's a biological term for a bacteria which is kind of taking a dormant, kind of latent shape and kind of deactivating other activities. It doesn't breed, it doesn't eat, it doesn't do anything. It just stays and waits for better times. Sometimes for decades, centuries, millennia. I don't want to go into like a lecture about endospores, but it's like a very interesting case. And I think it's quite a catchy metaphor, you know, when you deactivate certain functions in order to survive. When you wait for something, when you are becoming something else. And we've seen, like recently, we've seen in the previous decades, in the those moments when museums operated on a different level, like they kind of switched to something else. During the pandemic, many museums, like as the Queen Museum, became food centers. You know, they were distributing food to the poor, to the people in need, really taking care of the neighborhood. And it happened in many places, including the most radical example. It didn't happen, but it almost happened when IMMA, the Irish Museum of Modern Art, was supposed to be a mortuary. It was kind of pointed at the municipality that this is a building where the corpses might be stored, because it's a white space, it's a clinical space, it has an air conditioning. So, you know, a weird thing, not a funny anecdote, but really bringing something when we think about like institutional critique of the 70s. And sometimes those gestures, those decisions taken in museums were quite touching and quite profound, really exploring like other possibilities, you know, other realities, other ways of instituting, if you want to say such a word. This is a beautiful and quite famous Swedish painting from Sven Eriksson, depicting refugees being taken to the museum in Malmö in Sweden in 1945. Prisoners from concentration camps, maybe from Ravensbrück, mainly women, were accepted, were taken to the museum. Ernst Fischer, the director of the museum, decided that this is the function of a civic museum, to take care of the people. And they're like fantastic documentation. There's like beautiful photos of people sleeping in the museum, sharing the space with sculptures, with paintings, cooking there, and kind of like reviving. So this is quite a characteristic weird object, you know. This is an altar made, an assemblage, you know, it was produced by the former concentration camp prisoners, mainly like Polish women, who wanted to pray. They wanted to have like a place for worshipping, so they found a sculpture which used to function as a holy thing, you know, as an object of cult in the past, which was then musealized and which became an exhibit in a museum, and then it was like deactivated as a place to pray, to worship. And one of the prisoners who ended up in the museum, like living in the museum in Sweden, in Malmö, was Maja Berezowska, a fantastic artist known for her erotic cartoons and drawings in the communist Poland. She was an illustrator who was tracked down by the Nazis because she published some caricatures of Adolf Hitler in the 30s. Illustrating the article, The Love Affairs of Sweet Adolf. So she was tracked down and she was taken to the concentration camp, but she didn't stop drawing. And there are like fantastic drawings from that period, which also like ended up in the museum in Sweden, in Malmö. So this is like a very unusual thing. You have like, you know, like people who are really in need, ending up in a museum, like interacting with the objects, producing new artworks, producing the documentation of this terrible time. And just like a few examples. I know we don't have time, but it might be really maybe as a starting point for a discussion, for a conversation. You know what an institution might be sometimes. This is also like a beautiful example. From Palle Nielsen, who approached Moderna Museet. I don't know why I have selected only Swedish, mainly Sweden. I don't know. It's like a coincidence. But this is one of my favorite examples when Palle Nielsen, an anarchist, a self-trained architect, approached the museum and he appropriated it as a playground, as a so-called junk playground. There was like this tradition, mainly Danish and British tradition, like after the war, to give to children like building materials, like some concrete, some like, you know, like nails and hammers, and so they can play with it like creatively. Now it's impossible, but so the gallery was completely overtaken. That was you know, there was like huge loudspeakers with rock music. They were like selecting the vinyl records. They were like building, sewing, and establishing a new children communist party. That's why they are hanging the red flags. So it's like a total occupation, total distraction at the same time. And one of the most, I guess, important also like history of Moderna Mosette. Those so-called Creation Sundays in the Museum of Modern Art in Rio de Janeiro during the peak. Invited to interact with different materials. Like there was like a Sunday of fabric, Sunday of sound, Sundays of body, when no materials was available, but people were doing choreographies and so on. So this is like a very interesting trajectory, a very interesting legacy of using the infrastructure, using the resources of a museum, of an art institution when it's needed, you know, when it's needed for something else. The museum maybe it was over there. Into the Sunflower Community Center. We are called the Sunflower because and this to have like sunflower seeds in the package, so when they are dead, at least they are like a compost for the flowers. And so the Sunflower Community Center was initiated because of the activities of Ukrainian and Belarusian artists, activists, designers who were close to us, who were already like constituting like this network, and who were able to react immediately. So they transformed the space into a kind of like a gigantic sandwich factory, a place where medicine was distributed when, yeah, I am the, to avoid any kind of disappointment later, I am the one who like transfer the money from my salary to the Ukrainian army every month. So, you know, to avoid any kind of misunderstandings. And I celebrate all the victories of Ukrainian army, yeah, when they happen. So, so we were like surrounded by this very strange group of people who were trained to help refugees, working on the Polish-Belarusian border, facing the ongoing crisis, you know, like with, you know, non-white people who are like ending up in Białowieża forest. But this is like the other story. So you can see how things which we have as resources, as competences, as skills might be kind of activated. This is like a very simple example. A group of photographers, like professional photographers, offering their service to the refugees and taking ID photos. Yeah, this is like a, you know, if you need to be registered, if you need like a VIT number, you need a photo. And stupidly enough, in Poland, you need like a paper photo, you know, like this analog photo. And, you know, I don't know, like, so I know one photo studio where such photos are being taken, and this is really pricey. So if you can imagine like a family coming to Warsaw with 8 children, they need like photos for, it's a lot of money. So you have, you know, like those photographers just being there and taking those photos for free, but this whole operation transformed itself into a community kind of center. So when FIX were more organized, you know, like the film programs started, like those discussion cine clubs, so to speak, started, workshops, cooking activities, working mainly with There are like two collectives, like cooking collectives. There are Chechenian women and some Afghan women and Syrian women who are running this cooperative, and they employ refugees and they distribute the food to those refugee centers. So we're able, like, I kind of like, I know this question might pop up, you know, that you can piggyback, you know, on the situation, but actually it was a moment when money, like the financial resources were kind of flooding. Like when it was easier, I really like this observation of Zdenka, you know, about like, you know, what is the topic which attracts potential sponsors, for example, you know, but it was a moment when such artists as Wolfgang Tillmans, as Miriam Khan were sending money to the Sunflower, so we were able to channel those money to those cooking collectives, so they can like employ more refugees who are coming to Poland. And I guess this is like a, you know, quite an emblematic photo for me. So the Easter party in the museum, you know, like in the offices, you know, like, so we don't know those people, you know, like it's not a part of our audience, you know, it was a kind of recognized as a place where you can come with your family and have like spend like a quiet day. So, you know, to be clear, you know, like I'm not showing those images as an art project, as a program of the museum. I'm showing this like glimpse, you know, like this crack in the tissue of an institutional body when other things are possible, when other scenarios are possible. And this is not a friendly kind of relationship with the institution, you know? It's like, especially when you steal printers, you know, or something like that from your colleagues. But this is like a way of negotiating the boundaries, you know, because bringing the war home is not pleasant. And this is what you can hear from your colleagues in the institution. We want to keep, as Ekaterina said, we want to keep the war at a distance. Now, then it's tame, then you can really deal with it. You can scroll the bad news for a moment, but you can go to your office and, like, you know, dive into your Excel files and forget about it. But it's not possible when you have, like, you know, 100 kids with their, like, cats and dogs, also, like, you know, animal refugees. You know, this is also like other things. So just like a few images, you know, also like the Kiev, Warsaw Pride Parade, you know, with the participation of Kiev. I have like the last sticker from this series, if somebody wants, Ukrainian queers against Raskimir. And and the last thing is like something which you can really like continue, you can like go deeper if you want. It's the Soniak Digest. It's like the platform where we wanted to, it's a group of people. It's an international collective publishing texts, commissioning new works, and working as a kind of counter-propaganda center. So this is the last Sunflower kind of incarnation. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So thank you very much, all three of you. It's kind of overwhelming to hear this trajectory from discussing how the differentiation with the humanitarian, starting with Zdenka, with the humanitarian movement, that somehow separate the citizen to the human and the individual is metamorphosized, not to say transformed, now to a kind of a occupation of a museum to somehow become the humanitarian aid. So it's not like, or to offer platforms, so there is not like a third agent that belongs to a bigger organization that just gives food, and but also somehow the dignity is at stake here, and also through Ekaterina's presentation that brings the past directly into the future, in some ways defining your own title of a war in a distance or at a distance, but a war in a proximity. which doesn't really stop. And somehow it's interesting to see how often in the contemporary realm of the arts we have a void with history, not because we don't want to learn history, but somehow there is this kind of disassociation with collections and a kind of a reinvestment and reinventing of the wheel, which is always interesting to put all together. Thank you so much for being also here in that kind of warm room. I can start the questions between all three, but I think if there are pressing questions, we give the microphone to you, and then I can interfere because you've been with us for so long. So please let me know if there is somebody that really wants to say something in regards of these presentations. Something urgent. Yes, there is a question. Yes, it's always urgent. It's always urgent. So, yeah, 1 minute. We are all here. They're not all there. We are because of this.
Maybe I have two questions, but I'm not sure. This lovely humanitarian project that is going on, struck me questioning about its durability, you know, and to what extent does it stop being just a gesture and it becomes a durable long-term project? So that is something. And then another thing I wanted to ask you about, what you think is, because I also come from Greece, and I mean, we have a lot of Syrian refugees in Greece, and I felt really weird that as soon as the Ukrainian war, a lot more emphasis was placed on that, and then somehow the situation in Syria is kind of still seen as, it's not as important, and I think this has to do with proximity and distance and this. But I was wondering, in what sense, do you notice this in the way that the art world engages with these questions? Do you notice a certain favorability over certain wars? Yeah, these are my two questions. Thanks.
So, do you want to take the question of the durability, and maybe Zdenka and Ekaterina can take the other? There were questions to Sebastian.
Yeah, I guess they were addressed to me. So, the first thing is about durational aspect of such operation. Such energy cannot be invested forever. Also, the money cannot be invested forever, because we actually we spend our private money, all of us, buying food stuff, medicine, and so on. So, but things were to kind of clarify the situation in Poland, because from a distance it looked like a well-orchestrated design kind of operation. 4 million people cross the border. It's insane. It's the population of Warsaw increased by 17% in the first 4 weeks. So it's not something which you have seen since the Second World War, when it comes to this relatively short time span. But it cannot be, I cannot even remember those first weeks, and none of us can remember. We are trying to reconstruct it, fortunately we have some photos. But you had hundreds of people invading the space and doing things and bringing things. But I even tried to maybe I didn't stress it up, that it kind of changed into something else. That after a few months it became a community center which has a program. It's we kind of recognize the needs, or those people started to program this space. And the space is not an exhibition space, it's a part of our office. So with those cinema clubs, poetry readings, yoga classes, for traumatized, maybe it's a kind of a feminist collective which is running, it's only for women, so they're Sunday classes. And many other things, they are happening there in the space, but this is quiet now. You have, it's not this kind of messy overtake of an institution. This is like more structured, because this is like more natural now. You know, like people are settling down, and like more people come back to Ukraine now, you know, like than enter the country. So people don't want to be refugees, you know, they are coming back to those like burned houses. The other thing I don't like, you know, I don't like this question because it has been like posed and used in a very kind of denigrating way, you know, like diminishing way, you know, it's like, which is a part of this kind of whataboutism kind of philosophy, you know, you are not, it's like asking me why my father beat me, you know, like, you know, you help other people, why your father, my father didn't beat me, but, you know, like, coming from like a, you know, troubled family and so on, and accusing the families. You know, like, we are dealing with this issue, we are discussing it a lot with mainly our comrades from Global South, so to speak, like, mainly, even though, like, Oleksiy Radinsky, our friend from Ukraine, claims that Ukraine is the northwest part of Global South. If you kind of make this recalculation in the brain, it's...
Global South has become a kind of a trend.
Yeah, like the third world.
It's not a geographical notion.
It's not a geographical notion.
Yeah.
So in this case, you can make like this imagination.
Yeah.
Global South also here in Austria,
being
ignored.
Yeah. I've seen some in Poland as well. Yeah, so it's like a kind of imagination exercise. But answering it like really honestly, you know, like it's people who are engaged, you know, because the thing is like, you know, like this engagement was a grassroots initiative. You know, like it was just people, citizens, like taking people home, like sharing their food and taking care of children and taking a refugee cat to a vet and so on. So it wasn't organized by the government, you know, even though the government, with their like criminal, racist policy towards refugees, they were like, you know, like using it, like you're piggybacking on us, you know, like really, like promoting Poland as this kind of friendly nation which opens its door to like all those, you know, like war refugees. It's not true. It's not true because like the crisis on the Poland-Belarus border is ongoing. They are like Syrian families dying from hunger in this wild forest with European bisons, you know, in the swamps. So, and they are building a wall because, you know, what a country can imagine, you know, like what can invent a wall. So this is like, yeah, those people, so basically the people who are helping, they are the same people who are like going to the Polish-Belarus border to help the other people. And they are, one day they are being like celebrated, the other day they are arrested. And that's the case in
Just
Poland.
to add something here, since you say you're from Greece and we have experienced maybe not 4 million people in some, but about 2 million people during the 2015. So I know where the question coming from, and they were similarly grassroots organization, as you know and well know. Now, just to say,
only because I didn't like, you know, like, but the reaction. You know, those comparisons are...
No, actually, I want to say something about the comparisons.
There is something, it's a different war.
Yeah.
You know, it's according to me, is, you know, like in my, as I see it, it's the first climate world war. You know, like the climate world war, as we had like two second wars, first, the second war. It's the climate war, it's the energy war, on a scale which is unimaginable, like the consequences for Africa, for Southeast Asia, you cannot even predict it. And for us, like in Poland, it was an existential threat.
Yeah,
you know,
I
like
think we have
like,
to open up a little bit the
Yeah.
questions. Just, I wanted to say that obviously the game of comparing wars is kind of nasty, but
I am one of the signatories of BDS.
But
so, you know, like,
just to say,
clear,
just
you know.
to say, of course there are wars everywhere. There are also about the durability subject. grassroots, let's say, movements everywhere, especially these refugee women that help other refugee women are the first ones to ask about durability, because the same happens in Greece and other places where you see a lot of refugees, and they find ways not to give their own money, but to fundraise for this specific, not humanitarian. But I want to somehow a little bit also see whether there is any other questions for the other members of the panel, or if I should ask something, especially with Zdenka, because we the rest can discuss a bit over wine in the courtyard, but Zdenka is far away. So is there any question for Zdenka Badinovac from what you heard, or should I go on with my question? I see no one in the public. So Zdenka, I wanted to ask, one moment. Because I wanted to ask from my point of view, because it was very interesting to hear this kind of, which I totally empathize, this kind of discrimination back in the 90s between the human that needs to eat and, you know, the way that humans are being counted by humanitarian, let's say, organization, and the citizen, and what the culture has to offer. And if you can somehow elaborate a little bit on this point vis-a-vis what is happening now, and on the somehow, let's say, feeling and field of that war of what is happening now in the discourse, mostly. Is it something that you want to share with us?
Thank you, Marina. First of all, I have to say that the sound is very unstable, so I haven't heard many things what Sebastian was saying or Katya. So sorry about that. I think that the question about different, treatment of the refugees that was asked by the participant from Greece was very important, and there are also things that we can relate, Marina, to your question. The problem is, of course, that the refugees that are coming from elsewhere, not from Europe, are mostly without the papers. So they are, they lost their countries, they lost their, citizenship, actually. And, the thing with the Ukrainians, Sebastian was saying that many of them were already going back, that, and there are also in Ljubljana, not so many as in Warsaw, but still I know some people, and,
very important, they have where to go.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's difficult to say, that, but still, I think this is important issue, the question of citizenship. It is an important issue of the state that relates to Ukraine as well. So it is a question how much the state of Ukraine is sovereign still. And this is not something that we should relate only to the Russian aggression. It relates also to the West. I know that it's difficult to say in these days, but the fact is that American corporations, they own, I found the date, like 28% of entire Ukrainian territory. So this sounds really very, very serious. So the question of the state is the question of the citizenship, and we have to really be very, serious about these things when we talk. So one thing is humanitarianism, and I deeply respect what the colleagues in Warsaw do, and it's a fantastic project and all of this. But at the same time, when it comes to the question of different treatments of people without or with papers, we should be here serious, and also to discuss the question of the state. I think that even we are from the art world, we have to be related to the question that the intellectuals from the last century didn't like very much. You know, the question of the state, how much it is. We all want to be international and cosmopolitan and live in the world without the border, but without the borders. But we see the situation as it is at the moment.
Thank you, Zdenka. That gives us food for more discussion, because we cannot end here, but in our yard. And I wanted just to ask again the public if they have a question for Ekaterina Degot and what you heard, or if Ekaterina wants to add something to that debate as a...
Zdenka, I agree with Zdenka that this is a serious and difficult question. There are actually, what worries me a lot, that with best, even with best, to say, attitudes, we constantly see racism emerging. So in all this debate, or even not debate, even we all agree that the Russian aggression is an awful thing, but it's constantly popping up, some kind of racist comment, racist views, like Ursula von Leyen saying that Ukrainians, but they are our people. That's obviously that they are our people because they are white, or like constantly, everywhere. And indeed, it's probably something which is very deeply in our societies in the West, but as we now see, not just in the West. Also in like all the societies on our planet, and this is toxic, and this is an awful thing that really, you know, is really making things deteriorate, and we have to be all very careful not to, you know, not for this racism not to emerge in our own discourses, and we have to be very attentive to it, because indeed it's popping up now and then.
Thank you, Katerina. Thank you again, all of you. I want to also try to find a good note to end this panel, which was, apart from a poem. At a certain point, Zdenka said about people being many that they have this kind of counter beliefs and they can make a difference. And I think also what we heard from Sebastian is this kind of people that they make a difference, no matter if what you said about the being beaten, no matter if the government accepts this or that, which is extremely serious, of course, and we have to be aware of it. Like projects like the Sunflower or the Victoria project in Athens that got the first money with Documenta helping other people, or other projects like that nevertheless occupy. Eventually, they might grow to something that will abolish this kind of radical racism that unfortunately is getting stronger and stronger from the point of view of the governments. We see what's happened now in the elections in Slovenia, and we hope for maybe a better world.
Yeah, they won.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Bye, Zdenka. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Cześć,
Listening to you.
Oof.
Yeah.
I cannot breathe.
Yeah, no, is this like...
So what did you want to ask? We can go...